Remember the Spanish flu? That was the pandemic that 100 years ago, straight after the horrors of the First World War, swept the globe from 1918 to 1920 with an estimated death toll of between 17 and 50 million people, possibly as high as 100 million, making it the second deadliest pandemic in human history after the Black Death bubonic plague of 1346 to 1353. I had a little bird. Its name was Enza. I opened the window and in flew Enza. Get it? That was a popular kids' skipping song of the Spanish flu years. Anyway, the Spanish flu was very, very bad. You will recall that during COVID, on multiple occasions, our politicians and chief health officers and academics and bureaucrats all frequently compared COVID-19 to that very, very bad Spanish flu, or at least as being on a par with the Spanish flu. I mean, how often did we hear about the line about COVID being a 1 in 100-year event to justify all sorts of restrictions and mandates? Daniel Andrews made the claim in a press conference on 21st of November in 2021 that COVID is a 1 in a 100-year event. The claim was also made by Scott Morrison in a press conference on 18th of March 2020, and again by Queensland's Labor Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk on 29th March 2020, and Victoria's Chief Health Officer Brett Sutton on 12th of July 2020, labelled COVID the greatest public health challenge since the Spanish flu. The claim was naturally repeated on many news channels over the past 2 years, including by Nine News and Sydney's Daily Telegraph, as well as by many academics and commentators. But is it true? Is it legitimate to claim COVID-19 was on a par with or comparable to the Spanish flu? Well, not according to Sanjeev Sabhlok, an economist from Melbourne who you may remember resigned from his job from the Victorian Treasury in September 2020 to protest at what he called the police state in Victoria. He argued that the Dan Andrews government was undertaking grossly disproportionate public health actions to deal with the COVID pandemic. Sanjeev has been a vocal critic of the lockdowns and the response of both Labor and the Liberals to the pandemic, and he is planning to contest the seat of Balleen in the forthcoming Victorian state election, standing against Victorian Liberal leader Matthew Guy, whom Sanjeev derides as being just Dan Andrews light. The truth is, Sanjeev Sabhlok says that the COVID pandemic is vastly smaller in magnitude than the Spanish flu. He cites John Ioannidis of the Stanford University, the most heavily cited epidemiologist in the world, who has confirmed to him in writing that COVID is up to 500 times less lethal than the Spanish flu. Sanjeev has also co-authored the cost-benefit analysis of Australia's lockdowns, led by Gigi Foster, who's been here on Outsiders. That was published a few weeks ago, which showed that the harms to Australia are at least of COVID restrictions are at least 36 times the benefits. Over the past 2 years, Sanjeev has written repeatedly about the overreaction to COVID in newspapers, books, and The Spectator Australia. And he is now prepared to put his money where his mouth is. Out of his own pocket, Sanjeev is challenging Daniel Andrews to prove that COVID is a 1 in 100-year event on a par with the Spanish flu. And he is offering to pay Daniel Andrews $10,000 in cash if he can. Well, I would have thought that was pretty easy money. If off you go, Dan Andrews, you have a chat to your mate Brett Sutton and see if you can rustle up the proof to back your repeated claims from both of you that COVID was a 1 in 100-year event. Off you go. But there is one similarity I spotted between the Spanish flu and COVID, and that was, of course, how the authorities mandated certain behaviours such as mask wearing, with the police even making sure the public complied. But in the case of COVID and the Australian police, Their authoritarian behaviour, particularly but not exclusively in Victoria, was 1,000 times worse than during the Spanish flu. Nowhere, and I repeat, nowhere during the Spanish flu did we see scenes remotely approaching these.
What's this?
An ultrasound in an hour.
Yeah, she's pregnant.
You're head. You're What the are you doing? What the are you doing?
Media!
They're throwing stuff now, and okay, they're shooting. They're now shooting.
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
Both in terms of exaggerating the risks of COVID and imposing draconian mandates and restrictions, the governments of Australia must be held to account for their decision-making during COVID and the unacceptable impositions on our freedoms and the consequences and health impacts of their rules and mandates. In America, we now learn that, quote, lockdowns and other mandates to fight COVID-19 have led to the deaths of over 170,000 mainly young Americans through accidents, overdoses, and other illnesses, according to new research that finds a massive increase in mortality unrelated to COVID-19 since April 2020. All the major parties keep telling us we did brilliantly during COVID. Fine. Let them prove it. Let them answer for themselves. We urgently need a royal commission into the Australian governments and oppositions, all of them, and the damage I believe was needlessly done to so many lives, so many families, so many small businesses, and our economic future by the National Cabinet and its reckless COVID response, restrictions, and worst of all, mandates.